Thanks. Hello, hello, and welcome to Hygiene Elevated Conversations and Innovations. This evening, we get to talk to Dana Paladino. And Dana is the host of Dental Hygiene Basics for the Future of RDH podcast. Coming on her 1-year podcast anniversary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
With nearly a decade of experience, Dana has spent her career educating patients, dental hygiene students, and those seeking hygiene as a potential career path, all while spreading joy and positivity.
She does. I had the joy of connecting with Dana on social media and then through a phone call. And I have to say, it was just so neat how many things Dana and I actually have in common. It feels like we're living parallel lives, just on different paths. I don't know. We graduated the same year. Our podcasts are about the same. It just felt like everything, we were just riding the same wave, just solo, not with one another, I guess. But we also connected over being the entrepreneur RDH and striving for professional growth. So I felt like Dana's one of us, just doing as much as we possibly can in the hygiene realm.
Yeah.
Trying to elevate hygiene.
Yes, every day. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, Dana, to get things started tonight, I wanted to ask you a few questions about your podcast.
Yes. Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, so what inspired you to start podcasting for Future Hygienist?
Yeah, sure. Well, I do want to say, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to be on other people's podcasts because it's kind of fun to be flip-flopped on the other side of the mic. So thank you. The inspiration for my podcast. So there was kind of a time I was going through job change transition in life, and I had this thought. I was kind of really reflecting on my formal education experience, and I had some tough times in formal education where I had students who weren't successful. They come into the program, they're all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited to get started. And then something happens along the way and they're not successful, whether they struggle in clinic or they struggle in classwork or they have financial issues or whatever it is. We're all struggling with individual battles. And I know in hygiene school, we probably all had our own individual battles on top of going through hygiene school. And so I had these moments where I had these students that were not successful. There was one situation in particular that it just kind of wrecked me after the whole, she was unsuccessful, ended up having to leave the program. And I went home and I just cried to my husband. I was like, what could we have done differently? Why didn't we catch this sooner? Why didn't we realize she was struggling? We were trying everything we could, but it was too late. And so that had just been weighing on my conscience this was over 2 years that I had been thinking about this. And it wasn't the first student, it wasn't the last student. And so anyways, when I was going through this transition, and we could talk kind of about just how things have transitioned through my career later, but I was like, I want to create something for students who are interested in the dental hygiene field and are looking to start that journey. And I want them to know what to expect, the best ways to prepare, so that when they get in, maybe I could just save them some of the struggles that my other students went through and that I went through too, and every hygiene student, because we know hygiene school, it's like a battlefield, right? You come out with this badge of honor and it's like, oh, I went through it. It was so bad. I cried every day. You hear those stories over and over again. And I thought, when is that narrative going to change, where people come in, they know what to expect, they feel prepared, and maybe they have the tools to handle it a little better. So that is what inspired the podcast.
That is genius. Because at best, maybe you can talk to a hygienist. If you are a prospective student, you can maybe have a friend that went through the program and you'll get their perspective. Yep. But I think this is a very smart idea. This is so smart.
Well, I'm a huge podcast listener. I listen to podcasts all the time. And if I don't have an opportunity in my day to go on a walk or go on a car ride and listen to a podcast, I feel like I've missed out on something in my day-to-day life. But my favorite ones are ones where people tell their story of how they were successful. I'm really weird. I love personal finance. I think in an alternate life, I was an accountant. Like I really have this weird interest. So I listen to all personal finance podcasts. But one of my favorite ones, it's just interview style. And they ask people, how did you become a millionaire, basically? And they tell their story.
Okay.
And so I kept thinking, gosh, how nice would that have been when I was going into dental hygiene school to like ask those questions, how did you do it? Because that's what everyone wants to know. How did you do it? How did you get through it? What did you do to prepare ahead of time? How were you successful? And so I thought, well, if I'm getting this from these podcasts, I could help students achieve the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of how it all got started.
That's so interesting.
Everybody loves podcasts. Like who doesn't love a podcast?
Yeah.
My daughter, she's 11 and she had some earbuds in while she was like, I don't know, she was doing something at the table. And she goes, Mom, I am listening to the coolest podcast right now. And I'm like, since when do you listen to podcasts? And she goes, it's my first one, but I really like it.
I love that. That's incredible.
It's so cute.
Oh my gosh.
There's such a good resource. And that was the other thing that really meant a lot to me, was to put out something that was free, that you could just binge listen and learn so much and learn from other people, because that's how I learn. When I need to learn something new, I go find a podcast to listen to it. So I love that. So she's going to learn all sorts of stuff starting at 11. That's awesome.
I know.
As long as it's not
Okay,
true
so
crime.
I'm wondering, Dana, you had this initial goal or mission, right, of what you want to do. And through my own journey, I feel like my mission and goals keep changing. Yeah. And as I learn something new, I'm like, oh, I need to change what I'm doing. Like, I got to incorporate that too, and this and that. And I just like, it just keeps growing, and it's something totally different from like where I initially started. Have you run into that? Are you feeling like your track has definitely like evolved from like that first thought of where you were going to start from?
Yeah. I mean, I think I feel like I've carved out these different like little niches in different areas of where I'm working. So with the podcast, it was definitely geared towards helping future dental hygienists kind of get the ball rolling. And I really wanted to focus on that first year of dental hygiene school, like getting in and succeeding. Because I feel like the first few weeks of dental hygiene school, they will make or break you, right? Because if you don't get that foundation, it's like, you want to get ahead, not try and get ahead from being behind. So yeah. I feel like that has kind of stayed similar, but I have pivoted a little bit and talk a little bit more about dental hygiene school itself now. And I think that the listeners enjoy that. But then in some of my other ventures, like at the same time I started the podcast is when I got set up with Student RDH and started working as a national board tutor. And even though, she refers students to me, so it's all within my own business, which is really cool. But that was not really where I thought, I didn't know that that's where I was going to go with things. So now it's kind of evolved into thinking big picture about dental hygiene school and success from start to finish. So the starting line, when the day you decide to be a hygienist, until you add RDH to your name, who is there to support you through that entire journey? Kind of that external form of support, someone who's been there, someone who's been an educator and they've seen it before, but they also, I'm not that far removed from dental hygiene school. I mean, it's almost been 10 years, but I still feel, like I still have that connection to the students in school. And so it has kind of shifted a little bit. Now I try and think through the big picture, like long-term success from start all the way till graduation. And then I love to pass it off to people like y'all who like to help the graduates and help people who are kind of beyond that point. So I'm happy to pass the torch once they've graduated.
I love that. That is so beautifully well said. And I think that has grown exactly how it was supposed to. It's just seamlessly perfect.
I do. One thing that I always say is if you make space for opportunity will come your way. I say I operate out of like 50% fearfulness and 50% fearlessness at all times. Like, I'm like, what am I doing? But okay, I'm just going to go for it. So I always just dive in. And when I give myself space, I do feel like puzzle pieces start coming together. And I really feel like I'm at a point in my life where everything that felt muddy and unclear before is like, oh, that's why everything had to go that way and this way and that way to kind of lead to this journey and this point in my life where I could utilize everything I've learned, all the skills, all the hard times, all the good times, and put it all together. And it's like, man, it's weird how it all just falls into place like that. So
Amanda and I were literally having this conversation yesterday. We
really?
were like, I can't believe where our career trajectory has come from just 1 year ago.
Yeah.
And we were kind of just laughing about all of the little things the milestones we had reached, that we were like, it felt like a ridiculous idea. But if we hadn't done that ridiculous thing, then something great would never have happened that came right after that. So I just relate to that so much.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, so when you are creating the topics for your podcast, where do you pull your inspiration from? And okay, so I just want to ask two questions. Where does the inspiration come from? But then also, how do you like navigate the conversations to stay positive? Because I imagine everyone wants to just share their horror stories and it will scare everybody away.
Well, funny you said that, because I realized that I think I was leading, I trend towards being, I am a realist, but I'm also an optimist. So I really like to share, this is real life, this is what you need to expect. But out of those own experiences, I try and shift towards the positive. And this is something I've actually just added to the podcast. The questions is, what was your favorite dental hygiene school experience? Because, you know, it's so easy to talk about the negative. So I have tried to shift and make sure I add questions in to highlight the fun things of dental hygiene school, because I had a lot of really fun times in dental hygiene school. And, you know, in terms of just where do I find my inspiration, sometimes it comes from the weirdest places. A lot of times I'm literally just driving in my car, or I'm listening to something, another podcast on like motivation or something, and I'll hear something, I think, wow, I could adapt that to these students. Like, this is something that they could really benefit from. And so a lot of times it just kind of comes out of thin air. I kind of started getting scared, honestly. I thought, okay, I've talked about applications. I've talked about personal statements. I've talked about volunteering and shadowing. Okay, what else are they going to want to hear about? And then all of a sudden I thought, boom, something came to my head. It was like my dental hygiene heroes. And that was one that I just recorded. I was literally driving and I just like, hey, Siri, turn on voice memo, and just started talking about, you know, my heroes in dental hygiene who have impacted me. And some of them, I don't even know their names. I think we're going to talk about like my career bucket list later, but some people just impacted me who I don't even know their names, but they, you know, made me realize what was possible in dental hygiene.
Oh, yeah. I want to start listening to this. Okay, I'm curious. I love all of your inspiration and your passion for helping first year students succeed, because I remember how tough that adjustment was. But how do you kind of prepare for such a variety of programs? Because you have some associate degree programs and you have some bachelor degree programs. And so those, I think they look a little bit different. How are you kind of helping make those adjustments? Or is that like a new podcast episode idea for you? Right there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, my name of my podcast and my business is Dental Hygiene Basics. We all start with the basics, right? So regardless of what school you're going to, you know you're going to have to take pre-clinic and learn the skills of instrumentation. You know you're going to have to take radiology and learn how to take x-rays, the basics of oral anatomy, the basics of head and neck anatomy. Those are pretty universal across the board for what students have to take. I've actually taught at 3 different programs. That's a whole nother story in itself. So, and I taught, one was a community college, one was a for-profit, accelerated program, and then I also taught at a university. And while they were all
you got it all.
Yes. And that's where I feel like my expertise kind of comes in, because I've seen it all. And I feel like I've done it all with that. But there are these similarities across the board. And again, I think the main things is that students struggle with the same things. The number one is, just getting behind and not asking for help. And maybe finances can be a big one. And then managing emotional stress, right? So handling all of those, I think, are just big topics that I really try and go into in the podcast, to come at it from a different perspective, really that positive growth mindset. Because once you get in your head that you can't do something, or that you're behind, or that you're struggling, it makes it much harder to catch up, right? And so I try and give these really practical tools of, if you're not doing well, go talk to your teacher. That's what they're there for. And it seems so simple, but you would just be surprised how many students I would have come into my office where I had to drag them in. And then afterwards, they're like, I'm really glad we talked about this. I'm like, yes, that's what I'm here for. Like, if you don't come to me, I don't know you're struggling. And sometimes it's, these outside things that we don't know about. They don't tell us, they had a family member pass away and they need to leave for the funeral, or, they're struggling with finances. They can't pay for school. And those can be very personal topics. And so I really try and just encourage them to not be afraid to be open, to be vulnerable, and to seek outside resources for extra help.
That's like a skill that transfers beyond being a student, but transfers to being a provider. You really have to be compassionate, and when it comes to somebody's like medical histories can be sensitive information sometimes. So I think those are just like the building blocks to be a great provider.
Yeah. And you've talked about, or you asked about how the podcast has evolved. And, I mentioned that I am trying to bring a more positive light to dental hygiene. And these are all things that I've learned past hygiene school. When I was in hygiene school, I was very type A, needed a 4.0, involved in everything. And that's not a bad thing, but I sacrificed my mental health for all of what I thought I needed to do while I was there. And I didn't drop that when I graduated. It just got worse. Like when I got into dental hygiene, like actually the field. And so for me, it was important to kind of, I think this is a place where I can help people in more than just their career path, but maybe help them develop some of these emotional skills, some of these mindset changes early on that I do hope will translate to after they graduate, and they think through things a little differently and have a different perspective, to maybe make some of those mental struggles a little bit easier too.
I'm just I'm reflecting really, and I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking about, because I have to just say it now. But I just felt like being a new graduate, if there were anybody, like we had like an office manager, right? And she had quite the attitude. I would always think like, why is she so mad at me? And it was like part of my own professional growth. I hadn't reached the point yet where I was like confident to just say, that's just who she is. I'm going to worry about myself. But I really was that new grad. Like, why does she hate me? Why is she so angry to me? Like, what have I done to her? But now I have like a different mindset entirely. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, you're having a bad day.
Yeah. And some of that comes with life and learning. And I think we're all on the journey of just understanding people better. And like, again, I think that perspective is the big picture. And I think the way you look at yourself and you talk to yourself and you speak to yourself, then you can see in other people how they feel those same things too. The doubts, the insecurities, being overworked, being stressed, underpaid, it's like, now we can see it. It's everywhere. People are feeling these things, but not everyone can say it out loud or cover it up with a nice face and just be nice all the time, right? So that's the hard part. And yeah, I think it is hard for new grads out there. I struggled with that and more. We could talk all about that as we go along if you want, but I am grateful for the people who are out there helping new grads, because I needed it. I needed it so much when I graduated.
Yeah. Well, Joffrey, were you gonna?
I was just gonna say, when I graduated, I didn't even know there was anybody I could ask help from.
Right, it wasn't a thing. Hygienist. I've been a hygienist 16 years. It was such a different culture. It was like dog eat dog, and it was very well known hygienists would eat their own, and so it was kind of like, I'm just gonna go swim with the sharks as this little minnow. And the culture has completely shifted in hygiene, where it is about empowering providers. And why are we doing this? Why are we being so petty? Like, hello, we all went through this together. Let's be here for each other.
Yeah.
So no, I totally
Absolutely.
agree. So, Dana, I want to hear more of your journey as a hygienist. How has your role in the field evolved over the years? How did you get into hygiene? All those things.
Yeah. So it's a long, twisty story. This is where I'm going to plug my podcast episode about my dental hygiene journey because it is crazy. Like, y'all wouldn't believe it. Let's just say I applied to hygiene school at 19. I didn't get in. So I took a year off. I worked at Marshall's. I ended up going to dental assisting school. But then I decided I was going to go back and apply to dental school. So I finished my bachelor's, applied to dental school 3 times, did not get in. In that time, I was working as a surgical assistant in oral surgery, which was the coolest job of all time. I'm like, I recommend it. If anyone's interested in oral surgery, it's the coolest job. And in that time, I ended up moving back to Texas. I was going to school in Oklahoma, and so I was working at the oral surgery office up there. But when I was applying to dental schools, I was going to lose my Texas residency. And so I wanted to move back to Texas because there's 3 dental schools in Texas and only 1 in Oklahoma. So I moved back, started working as a pediatric dental hygiene assistant, and was applying. Anyways, I didn't get in, long story short. And so I decided, you know what, I want to keep my career going. I know I want to field in dentistry. Like, I love assisting, but I'm ready to take the next step. I'm going to try for hygiene again. So I applied to hygiene school again. At this point, I had my bachelor's degree. I had a lot of dental experience, none of which I had any of the other times, that I was applying to dental hygiene school the first time. But anyway, so I ended up getting in, and by probably the second week, I was thanking God that I'd never got into dental school. I was like, this is where I was supposed to be. And that's where I say, like, trust the journey, because sometimes doors are closed because that's not where you're supposed to be going. I mean, and I was desperate. I was miserable. Like, please let me into dental school. Now I'm like, I am so glad I am not a dentist, like, because I know what would have happened. I would have gone to dental school, paid $300,000, and I would have become an educator, And I'm like, I did that as a hygienist, and I love dental hygiene. I feel like I am perfectly suited as a hygienist. So anyways, I got into hygiene school. And I was the president of our student association. So I spent a lot of time working with the faculty. And I realized, like, man, they do a lot of really cool stuff outside of just education. And I realized how committed they were when I was sitting at a committee meeting at 7:00 on a Tuesday, and my faculty was there with me because I was on this committee and I had to have faculty representation. I just thought, man, that's so nice of you. Like, you should be home with your family, but you're here with me because this is a passion of mine. And so anyways, I really started getting close with my faculty. And that's when I realized, like, I could teach dental hygiene. I don't know. And I never thought about that before. And so after I graduated, I knew I was going to go back and be an educator. I worked full time while I did my master's, which I don't recommend. I mean, you can work full time and work on your master's. Just don't do what I did and finish it in 1.5 years. Like, take your time. It's cool. And then so I did that. I was planning a wedding. It was chaos. It was just a crazy time in my life. And I was stressed as a new grad, but I ended up working clinically for a little over 5 years. And then I transitioned into teaching. I was miserable at my clinical job, and I wanted to teach so bad that I took a job only working 2 days a week at a school 2 hours away. And I would drive there every Tuesday and Thursday. And it was Coastal Bend College. I always love to give them a shout out in Beeville, Texas, because the director there gave me my first shot educating. I had no experience, and it was incredible. I loved it. I was hooked. So anyways, I worked there, but it was a long commute. So I was hoping for something closer to home eventually. And that's when I started working at the for-profit college. And then eventually my alma mater called and said, hey, we're opening up an application, and, if you want to apply. And they knew I wanted to apply because I always tell people I would call my director every year, or I'd email her and just be like, hey, how's it going? Like, are you hiring yet? Can I come work for you? So she knew I wanted to go work there. And so anyways, I ended up I call it formal education. My last formal education job was at the university. And anyways, some life transition happened where my husband we ended up moving to a different city. And so that's when I started going through this process of, okay, I have time off because the only school in Corpus where this is another long story. I moved to Corpus, then we ended up moving back to San Antonio for my husband's job again. I'm like, what are you doing to me? But it all worked out for the best. But there was a school in there was a school in Corpus, and so I was gonna apply there, and then I was getting ready to start when we found out we were moving back to San Antonio. But anyways, it all worked out because in the meantime I had started the podcast, and then I had gotten set up with Claire, and she was referring tutoring students to me, and I was like, I think I can do this, like more than just part-time or one day a week or two or in the evenings. Like, I think I can make this an actual business. And so that's where I'm at now. I do work one day a week as a public health hygienist, which I love. I go into elementary schools. I do sealants and fluoride, and it's perfect. It's like I get out of the house one day a week. I get to go use my hands and my skills. I love working with the kids. And then I love to go home and educate the students. So it's a weird, twisty journey. And there's a lot more interweaved into that story, but that's how I ended up kind of where I am today.
I love that. Everybody's story is so different, so unique. And so it's the best question that we ask people, I think, is what's your journey? What's your story? And
I know, and it's so common that a bunch of our guests have moved around to states and had to like figure things out from scratch again. And I'm like, I've never went anywhere. I just stayed right here.
Well, the weird thing was because my husband was in the fire academy in Corpus Christi. And this is just a story. This is just a random story about how sometimes life takes you exactly where you're supposed to be. So when he got hired into the academy here, he was older. His was like a career change. You know, he was, 36. If he didn't get in that year, he was not going to become a firefighter because he was aged out. So he's kind of going on this journey. Well, at the time he gets in, I get the job hire at the university, which has been what I've been working towards, since I graduated. And so we're like, what do we do? So we lived apart for a year and a half while I was working there and he was there. And then we were both just like, we can't do this anymore. And so I was like, I'm ready to transition. And so I moved here. I'm back in Corpus right now, which is why I keep saying here. We're just here for like a couple of weeks, just hanging out at the beach. So I know this is a weird story. Anyway, so we moved down here. We get a little place. We rent a little place on the island for the summer where we're going to decide where we're going to live. Well, our neighbor ends up being the battalion chief of the fire department in San Antonio. And so next thing you know, we're friends with them. Next thing you know, he's offering my husband a job. And so like I lived here for 4 months before we moved back to San Antonio. And it was all a better journey, right? Like everything fell into place the way that it was supposed to, but it was just weird. It's weird how life goes like that. And you do, I've had to pivot and change a lot in my career, but every time I feel like I get a little better and a little less scared of what's to come. Cause I'm like, I'll figure it out. It's all good.
Yeah. No, I think that's very, very true. Yeah. All those things.
I think that is so cool how your neighbor was the chief of the fire for you. Like, what are the odds?
I know. And my husband was like, Dana, I think I want to take this job. And I was like, there was a time where I thought my head was going to explode a little bit. It's like, I literally just quit like,
I love you, but I can kill you.
Yeah. Oh, it was something. And we're like super chill. Like we really do go with the flow on a lot of things. If you ask our friends, they're like, we're really never quite sure what Dana and Matt are up to because they're always shifting and changing. But it, like I said, it all seemed to kind of come back into place. Like that was where we were supposed to be. And so we just had a fun adventure at the beach for a couple of months and then we turned around and went back.
I love that. And I especially love when you say like life takes you exactly where you are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And you shared your journey about how you thought you really wanted to be a dentist, right? And you had applied to these programs and you didn't get in and it was like meant to be, right? This is where you're supposed to be at. But I have to share with you, my husband applied to dental school, many dental schools, and did not get in. And that it's just the way it was supposed to be, because now that I'm a dental hygienist and I'm in the dental clinic all the time and working side by side with dentists, I'm like, you would hate this job. Like you are not meant to be a dentist, because he's
He's not
I
a
mean,
people
he's an
person.
amazing human being for sure, but just not like that social like flip of a switch to be you have a personality as a provider, and I'm like, he would be so exhausted. He cannot keep that persona going long enough. And so I'm like, oh, this is where he's supposed to be.
I know it really is. There's a saying, and I cannot think of it right now. Maybe it'll come to me later, but it was something about, it's not a no. It's it's the universe's way of trying to protect you, right? From going down a road that is not supposed to be the one you're supposed to. Because had I not gotten into dental hygiene school, I probably would have just kept trying over and over and over again. And then I probably would have gotten in and been like, maybe this wasn't what I thought I wanted for the last however many years. It's true. And you don't know until you know, but I just really try and not think of any type of no. And I still get no's. I still get no's and rejections till this day. Because I'm just one of those types now. I'm like, just shoot your shot, see what happens. Literally the worst thing they can tell me is no. And I'm not even afraid of that anymore because I've been told it so many times. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
That's such an empowering place to be when you realize I can be told no and it will not shatter me. It's just an answer.
Exactly.
Well, this actually reminds me of an exercise that Amanda and I did last year in RDH Evolution. And part of the assignment was you wrote down things you wanted to happen, and then what was going to happen, what would be the worst case scenario. And you wrote that out for each one of your items. And then you wrote how you would overcome worst case scenario. And it was when you wrote down how you would overcome it, you're like, oh, it doesn't seem so bad anymore. And that was just a mind altering exercise. Cause I'll never forget it. So now I'm with you. What have I got to lose? It's fine.
Yeah. It's so funny that you said that because I was listening to a podcast, of course, the other day, and they were talking about how when you're really stressed out and your amygdala starts firing, it puts you into that fight or flight mode. You lose that critical thinking of being able to think through solutions. You go into that worst case scenario. You try and run, hide, fight, whatever it is. But if you write down things, it brings you back into your prefrontal cortex, which brings you back into your higher level of thinking and allows you to problem solve at a higher level. So I've been actually telling my students this because the students that I mainly work with on the national boards for tutoring are students who have not been successful. So I'll tutor anyone if they reach out to me and they're like, hey, I need help. But the bulk of the people that I help are people who have taken it and have not passed. Some of them haven't passed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and they're still trying. And at this point, you're dealing with so much anxiety that I'm like, look, the material will come. I can teach you anything. You can teach yourself anything. I'm like, what we need to overcome is that stress and anxiety related to the test. And so I'm really trying to work with them on just using journaling to get out those thoughts and to overcome some of that. And then even on test day, look, when you start to feel overwhelmed, just start jotting notes on your board because that's going to pull you back up into your higher level of thinking. And you start to be able to solve problems more clearly and easily. So I know that's kind of a little off topic, but speaking of that, I feel like that's a good tie-in. Yeah.
That's life strategy. Making lists and dealing with those fears. It's very real.
It is.
It takes the problem into an immeasurable problem down to a measurable problem that you can solve.
Yes. And you're kind of like, those things aren't happening to me right now. The worst case scenario is not in this moment right now. So all I need to do is just plan for the next step, one step forward, one step forward.
100%.
So you mentioned you mostly work with students who have not passed those board exams. Are you seeing a pattern on what board they're taking that's being more a higher fail rate, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. So with the national board, it's the same company that oversees the written national board, the one that everyone has to sit down and take. Yeah. So with the written national board, everyone's taking, I say the same test in parentheses because it's administered by the same company. It's written by the same company, but everyone gets a different test, right? So some people's might be more pharm, some people's might be more radiology. You don't know what you're going to get, so you really have to know it all. But the failure rate has gone up. So in 2015, when we graduated, the failure rate was around like 7 to 8%, I think. So, I mean, 92% had a first time pass rate, which is really, really good. But it's gone down over the years. Right now, it's at almost a 25% fail rate. So at the first time taking it. Yeah. And
Wow.
that's a big leap in 9 years, and it's just been going up. Now, I do think that COVID played a big role in this because I know students struggled through COVID. They weren't getting the education that they really needed or deserved, but that's nobody's fault, really. We couldn't control the parameters that were happening, right?
Right.
Suddenly you're being taught at home. You should be hands-on in a skills lab, and you're just not connecting the dots like you needed to. And so I actually still tutor students who have not passed and they were going to school during COVID. I mean, and this is years later. So it's really difficult to see that. But I like that they're still trying. That's the most important thing to me. And that's what I tell them, like, you're here and you're trying. And that means that we're going to get there. It will take time, but we can get there for sure. So it is tough with the failure rate going up. That was something that I think transitioned my podcast and my thought process on planning and what I'm doing and thinking about that big picture. I'm also a CDCA examiner, so that's the mannequin exam. So I travel out and do different mannequin exams at different times of the year. And, with that, that's testing on something that you haven't practiced on since pre-clinic, right? You learn to work on a mannequin, but then for the rest of your schooling, you're practicing on patients. So we're having a lot of difficulties with that changeover too, where people are like, how do you prepare for an exam that is hard to prepare for on a mannequin? And so I feel like seeing that big picture, I am just much more attuned to what the students are going through and the struggles and the failures. Like, I'm just more aware of it now. I feel like as an educator, I was so consumed with my group, and now it's like, wow, if we look at the big picture, students are struggling. They're really struggling, not just with clinical, but also with the written boards. And so that was another thing that's kind of shifted where I'm going with my business is, okay, let's get people ready out of the gate. Like the first day they step into dental hygiene school, how are we making sure that they're going to be successful all the way to the end? And that's been something new that I haven't really been thinking about previously.
Well, Dana, you just mentioned something that I actually never thought of it that way before. And it's when you said the challenges of having the mannequin at their board exam, because the only thought I ever really had about them going to mannequin was like, how lucky they don't have to like cross their fingers that like their patient's going to show up, right? Like they get to take the exam.
Yes.
And so I never thought of that as being about there being negatives to it. And you just highlighted that there are some, like there is not a perfect system yet.
Yeah. There's pros and cons. A lot of people it's controversial still. People are like, no, it should be on human only. Okay. I tested on a live patient and it was terrifying. And so I'm like, I really liked seeing my students know that their patient, the mannequin, was going to be there on test day. But it's really hard to prepare them for that test because the calculus is different. There's no saliva, there's no blood. It's like, it's just a lot of unknowns. A test is an unknown every time you go into a new test anyways, but the mannequin is still a lot of unknown, and students do struggle with it. It does still have a higher pass rate. It is a good pass rate. For the most part, students are passing the mannequin exam, but I think it is still a necessary part of becoming a licensed provider. I do still think it's good to see clinical skills being tested. And that's kind of controversial too. Some people think if you passed a program, you shouldn't be tested. But I've been a new educator, and I know that I was not at the top of my game the first day I stepped out of the gate teaching clinical skills, right? And so if you're in a program where there's been a lot of turnover and people are figuring out, oh, we need to do competencies. Oh, we all need to be calibrated, make sure that we're all teaching the same way. And when you're going through program turnover, I think it's good to have an external source to grade your students to make sure that they are ready, because I think it can reflect on the program a little bit like, oh, we need to make some changes, and it keeps the programs accountable as well. That's a
points.
Controversial opinion, maybe a little. I hope no one gets upset hearing that, but
Yeah.
that's my thought process. Not you guys. I know y'all are cool.
Oh,
Yeah, like, I do
I'm
it.
so sorry. Did my face say that?
Test them. What is it to me? I already have my
never know.
license.
You never know. On Instagram, people get upset about things. I'm never here to upset. That is solely my opinion on the matter. So yeah.
No, I think your points are very, very valid. It's kind of an unbiased third party. There's nothing wrong with making sure that the public is safe in that regard. Like that is a unbiased third party making sure patient care is kind of standardized, that you're somewhat competent to do
and
that.
Dana has a perspective that the typical dental hygienist wouldn't have. Not every hygienist has the opportunity of working in many different institutions. So I think your opinion is very valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing too is with universities, anywhere that's teaching nowadays, there is a lot of pressure on these universities to maintain the retention, to make sure that students aren't leaving the program. It does still happen, but sometimes they're given second chances, third chances, opportunities, and maybe they really weren't ready to be a hygienist at that point, or maybe they really did need to go start back over. And so while I hate to think of it in this way, but those exams are the gatekeeper. Like you said, we have to keep our profession safe. And sometimes faculty, they do feel like a loss of autonomy in deciding if the student is actually ready to graduate. There's sometimes those pressures from the institutions themselves. And so, like I said, I think it's really good to have that gatekeeper to keep the universities doing the right thing. And, if your students aren't passing, then we need to change something. So.
That sounds very similar to do we call it a prophy or do we call it SRP? Right? It's like the same dilemma. Like there are some offices that want to keep it as the prophy, just like you're talking about the educators. I'm like, it's happening in more than one area of our realm.
Yeah, there's always something that can be improved or that isn't maybe happening, and that's the hard part. It's like, how do you fix all of the issues? And sometimes you just have to think of the other side. It's like chicken or the egg, like which one is going to be better or worse for the overall population. And I think that is our duty as hygienists, to consider the safety of the overall population. And yeah.
So,
all right, I want to turn the corner here. And Dana, I want to ask you, what is on your career bucket list?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So I've been working on a career bucket list for many, many years. And it's just when something comes up that I'm interested in, I'm like, I'm going to do that one day. So public health has always been an interest of mine. I loved it in dental hygiene school, going on the rotations. I was like, one day I will work in public health. And now I do. It's one day a week, but I do it. One other thing that was on there was being an examiner at the time when I told you a little bit about this, Joffrey, but I was
you share this story with Amanda. It's so perfect.
Yeah, I was on an airplane. This was before I was applying to dental school at the time. And I was sitting next to a hygienist on an airplane. Don't know her name. She's one of my dental hygiene heroes, the unnamed ones. And we're just talking, and she's like, telling me about what she's doing. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, where are you heading this weekend? She's like, oh, well, I'm a dental hygiene examiner. So I'm flying out to administer the exam. And so she was going to do the grading for the live patient exam. So she's telling me all about it. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, I wasn't even in school yet. So of course I couldn't comprehend everything. Right. But I thought, that is so cool. So then when I got into school and I went through my rev and I was taking my patient exam, I remembered her and I was like, I'm going to do this one day. And now I'm doing it, which is super cool. So she's the unsung hero. I always tell them, she was on a flight from, I think, Houston to Oklahoma. And if anyone knows a hygienist out there, she was incredible. But so anyways, that was one thing. Now on my career bucket list, it's definitely growing the business. With dental hygiene basics, I am thinking big picture. I'm trying to really build an external resource for students to help them But I do have some like clinical things I still want to do, even though I don't work clinical. I really want to learn how to do guided biofilm therapy because I just think that that's the future and I want to know how to do it. In Texas, we're finally being allowed to do local anesthesia, infiltration only, but I'm going to learn how to do it. And there was something else, and now it's totally gone from my mind right now. Man, I had another one that was really good and I forgot. But the main focus for me at this point is just really focusing on growing my business and helping students become dental hygienists.
I think having a career bucket list is the most type A personality thing I've ever heard.
That's me.
You've achieved. I aspired to be you.
You know what, though? I think that's why I just keep moving forward. And when I felt really stagnant in clinical and I was not happy in my clinical job for a number of reasons, but I kept thinking like, what can I do next? What can I do next? And that's just where I'm at. I'm open to so many different opportunities. And so I keep trying new things. And, you know, if something doesn't work out, it's like, okay, I tried it and that wasn't for me. But who knows what else can come up. You know, I just have to, if I hear something I'm interested, I'm like, yeah, sure, let's try it. Why not?
That's so cool. No, I think that goes along with what the advice that you're giving your patient, or not your patients, your students that have that test anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, getting out of your own head and being able to identify that fear or where you're stuck, that problem, and working past it. So putting that to paper, making a list of things that you're going to do, like, I am going to achieve this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I have journals and stuff, I mean, from years back. And it's fun to go back and read them and see things that I said, like, I'd be interested in this, or things I want to do, and being like, oh, dang, I did that. Like, I did that and it went well. Or, okay, I did that and it didn't go so good, but I mean, I did it. Like I said, I wanted to do it. I know manifestation is a little woo-woo, but with that, you know, I heard once it was anything you ever think about that you're interested in is you putting a plan into motion in the universe. Like if there's something that you think of that you want to do, everything that you've ever wanted to do, like when you decided you wanted to become a dental hygienist, like you didn't know how you were going to get from point A to point B, but you decided you wanted to do it. You thought that into reality. So I think that there's a lot of power in our thoughts and how we can create our own realities based off of our thoughts.
That is so true.
It's woo-woo, but it's weird, right? You're like, oh, dang, everything I ever did was because I thought it first.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
Yes. What should we think of next?
Like,
right, Amanda?
I feel like Joffrey's head is spinning right now.
Yes, think big. Seriously, think big. And, you know, one thing that they say is whenever you're thinking up these things, you know, sometimes your body or your mind will tell you, I can't do this. That's too hard. There's too many steps between from here to there, to that thing I'm dreaming of, right? And a lot of students feel that from here to me becoming a dental hygienist, they see the end point, right? The person holding the instruments, it being really easy, but there's all of those steps in between, the just learning how to hold the instrument. You know, there's a lot of those steps, but if you think it and you put your mind to it, you can do it. It's just, you have to know that you've got to overcome those steps in between.
Yeah, no, that's...
You know, one of the thoughts I get stuck on quite a bit is when I do think like, oh, that's a great idea. I want to do that. I want to try that. And then I have all these things in motion, and it's a lot of energy, time, all those things. And the thought I often run into is like, what was I thinking that I could do this? Like almost like self-doubt as I'm in the process. Like it's going to get done no matter what now. But I'm like, who did I think I was when I decided to do this? And then I keep going, and then I'm done, and it turns out just perfect. But there is a part of me during somewhere in most processes where I'm like, who did I think I was? Like
that is a really good point, because I have been there. I mean, halfway through and you're like, oh gosh, this was a mistake. I actually just pulled the plug on something recently, and not because I didn't want to do it. I just like I didn't have everything I needed in the moment. And I just knew, I was like, I don't have 100% to give to this right now. And old Dana would have never pulled the plug, but I'm turning a new leaf because I really am. I'm like, you know what? I focused only on career for the last 15 years. And I don't know how to live a life outside of my job. I love my job. I love working, but now I'm like, I want to try new things outside of dentistry. So I do have a new separate bucket list. But, one tip that I read somewhere a long time ago, it was like, if you start reading a book, you don't have to finish the book. As my personality, I was like, that's not how I operate, right? I'd be
that
like,
gave
no.
me anxiety.
Yes. But you know what I do now? If I'm start reading the book, I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I stop the book because I'm like, my time and the things like our lives are so short to just focus on things that are just to do it, right? It's like, what's the point? So now I pull the plug. Like if something is really not sitting right with me and I don't do it right away, for a book, maybe yes. But this situation that I had recently where I had to say, look, I'm sorry. I know I kickstarted this project and I'm the one pulling the plug. Like this is my fault. But, I realize now that sometimes it's fear. Sometimes I'll ask myself the question, how did you feel when you first started it? Were you really fired up and you just couldn't wait to get started? That same passion is still in there. You're just scared, right? But if I'm feeling dread going to it every day, and not because I'm scared, I'm like, that's dread. That's like, I'm not looking forward to doing this today. That means that it doesn't need to be on my bucket list. It needs to go bye-bye, at least for a while. Yeah.
I like how you said we can stop reading books. I don't think I finished a book in a really long time.
Honestly, there's so many books out there that just are not good anymore. And like, it's just like TV. It's like, there's constantly new books coming out. I keep picking one up and I'm like, this is just not entertaining me. And so, yeah, put the book down.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, but I have to say, Dana, when I heard you just say that you have spent the last 15 years being career focused, and you're just to summarize what you're saying, Liz, like your work is your like passion in your life. It's very consumed who you are, right? And it just like made me think, have you ever had the opportunity to speak with Olivia from Olivia Talks Teeth? Is her handle on Instagram.
I follow her.
You two have to meet each other at a phone call or something, because she has this perception that is just beautiful and it makes so much sense. And she says very often, I work to support my lifestyle. And so her main priority is her lifestyle. And she will, that is like tried and true who she is. Like she is a phenomenal like professional in the industry still, but her focus and her priorities are arranged in an order that I aspire to live like Olivia. I'm like, oh my gosh, that girl, she is amazing. You have got to connect with her.
Yes, I will.
Olivia, if you're listening, hello, I love you.
We do. We love her.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so true because like I said, I do love my job. I'm passionate about it. At some point I'll step away, but like I'm building this business to support students and to support myself too. But also, it's a passion of mine. It's something that really makes me excited to do. But I am the type that I could work 12-hour days and never see my husband. And it's like, I'm starting to realize now what I'm learning is if I give myself space away from my job, and I know this sounds so simple and like, duh, but I am better at my job. And the thing is, I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit. When I came out of school and I was a new grad and I had that still like perfectionism mindset, type A, I got to do everything right. I got to be perfect. I have to be the best at this because my patients rely on me. I have to give it 100%. And I do believe that's true. I think we should be the best hygienists we can be every single day. But I was not dropping that when I got home. I was working on my master's. I was getting ready for this wedding. We're transitioning into like married life. We moved to a new place. Like there was no space outside of just this go, 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 go. And when I got into education, I was much happier because finally was living out my passion and it felt good. And I was like, yes, I knew that this was where I was supposed to be, but I didn't drop those old habits of, filtering through emails in bed at 6 a.m. or, waking up in the middle of the night, oh, better check my email, or like there was no separation between me and my job. And I loved it though. Like I felt really energized, but looking back on it now, I realized that it was all adrenaline. And because of that, I did crash, but also I had a lot of highs and lows. I was not in a balanced state, if that makes sense. Like I would go home and I could never come down. I would be like amped, 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 amped. And then maybe the weekend I would just crash and just, oh my gosh, like I felt stressed all the time. And so even though I was the happiest because I was finally doing what I felt like I was supposed to be doing, I did feel like I was on this roller coaster and I was not my best self. I mean, I think most days I was doing a really, really good job as an educator, but then there were times where I reflect back and like, I wasn't my best self in that moment. If you got frustrated with a student or something, and I'm not the type to really like freak out on anybody. That's just not me. But, sometimes it was hard to kind of mask those emotions. So when I look back on my time previously, like up to this point, I realized that I needed a lot of mindset work too. And I realized I didn't have the space in my life to do that. And that's where I'm shifting now. And I'm really realizing, I'm kind of practicing positivity on a daily basis. And over the last like 5 years, it has become a part of my daily life. But with that being said, it was really hard during that time. And so now I'm really like, okay, I need to focus on things outside of that to bring happiness and joy into my life and start experimenting with other things. So my new thing now is I try one new thing a week. This is only week 2 of doing this, but it's going very well so far. This is my new.
What are the new things you've tried?
Yeah, what are the things?
I want to know.
Okay, well, so 2 weeks ago, we went to Beer Fest, which, I mean, I've never been to Beer Fest in Corpus Christi. So we tried all the different beers. They had all these different craft beers, which was a lot of fun. And then this week on Thursday, we went to putt-putt. Now, I have been putt-putting, but we went in Corpus to like a place we had never been. I haven't putt-putted in like at least 10 years. So to me, that was a new thing. But I'm just trying to get out. I have a lot of things that I've said for years I want to do, and I just haven't done them. So now it's like, okay, I live down the street from the Botanical Gardens in San Antonio and the Whitty Museum, and I live down the street from all this really cool stuff. And I've lived there, for multiple years and I've never gone. And it's like, why? Because I was working. So now I'm like, I want to do both. I want a good mix.
Good for you.
I'm really glad you showed those Botanical Gardens.
I'm going to go.
Yeah, just last week, I bring my work home all the time and I work on it throughout the day whenever in my mind feels convenient, even if it may not be convenient for the people around me. And I can be completely content just being next to my husband. Their television could be on, but I want to be on my laptop, not talking, not having a conversation. But to me, I feel like we're hanging out, we're together, right? And that's only my perspective. My husband's like, no, I really want to spend time with you. And I'm like, oh, is this not spending time together? And so I'm like in my own world sometimes. And
the same.
And it's so refreshing to hear like, oh, other people have like similar struggles. And
yep. Yeah. My husband would be like, you're on the tiny screen again. Like, I can't break the tiny screen. Like I was like, but they need me. They need me, the student. I'm like, just one more email. I know it's hard. And it's hard when you love doing it. Like it makes me feel good to help people and to help the students. But at what cost for me personally, like, I did not have a life outside of work for several years. I mean, we would still, that may be dramatic. We did still do fun stuff. Like, I still enjoyed, we travel and do stuff like that, but it was just too hard to separate myself. So I'm trying new things. This is my new thing.
Well, and what's really cool is to have that self-awareness of like, okay, what has been happening? I want to change it. And like just making that, just recognizing it and then trying to do better. Like, and that's what it's really about, is just being like a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. And, an example of that is just trying to juggle and navigate our own podcast. Amanda and I have gone through like various scheduling options, and now we have finally found one that is working really well for us.
That's good.
But it was trial and error. And And but we didn't give up on the podcast. We kept it going, and now we have it like ironed out, and I love where it's going, but it was definitely a huge learning curve.
Yeah.
It is. Everything is when you're starting. Everything takes time when you're figuring it out. And that's really been one thing that I've been focused on with the business that I'm growing is how do I grow this in a way that's sustainable for me long term and doesn't mean me working 7 days a week for until I decide to, retire. How do I do that? And some advice that I got was think about your ideal life and your workday and what you would do and create that. And then everything else will fall into place because that's what you're doing, right? So for me now, I tutor Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I only work in the evenings on Monday and Tuesday because I need to have time with my husband in the evenings, on other days of the week. He's a firefighter, so he's gone 2 days out of the week. So when he comes home, I can't be in front of the tiny screen the whole time because he's, like our days together, even though he's off 4 days at a time, we have a lot of time to spend together, but it has to be quality time, like you said, because I'm content being on the tiny screen, but our spouses sometimes need more than that. And so that's what I'm trying now is how do I create this life that is what I envision? Because that was a purpose of starting the business too, so I can be my best self for others.
I love that. And, I want to kind of shift gears a bit before we pop off today, but could you tell us about your new beta course?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, with dental hygiene basics, again, the whole goal has always been to support students entering into and going into dental hygiene school. That was where it started. And the podcast was the entrance to that. And the kind of follow-up to that was to create this course. It's called Dental Hygiene Basic Training. So just like when you go to the military, you go through basic training first before they kind of drop you in, right? You have to go get ready. I decided I was going to come up with this course to help get students ready for dental hygiene school. So the course right now, it's just in its pilot testing phase. I have 5 students who are starting this week. So they're going to go through a online course and it will have, an actual video and some quizzes and study material. And then we're going to meet once a week to go through different ways to prepare for dental hygiene school. Some of them are study tips and tricks. Some of them are time management. We're also going to be talking about finances. We're going to be talking about mindset, talking about how to prepare for like hand skills, clinical skills. My job in this course is not to teach them everything because that is the hygiene professor's job, right? Their job is to go to school and learn, and they will learn everything that they're supposed to in dental hygiene school. But because I saw so many students struggle in the first month, I know for me personally, when I got into dental hygiene school, I felt antsy. Like, what can I do to get ready? A month before school starts, what could I be doing to get ready? And I was kind of looking through my textbooks and it was like, I didn't fully understand the material and I was trying to get too far ahead. So with dental hygiene basic training, they're taught by an educator. They get to see my face. They get the content in a PowerPoint fashion or presentation. And I break it down to the simplest parts. Like, these are the key points that will help you be successful those early weeks of school so that you start out a few weeks ahead instead of getting in there and potentially being a few weeks behind, within the first week, because we know how intense that first week is. So yeah, that's my program. I'm excited to test it out and see what the students think. And it's just another resource to help get students through this program and achieve their goals, because that's the whole point of it.
Okay, Amanda, I'm over here like, I wish I had that.
I know. I think, Dana, you're just so smart.
I'm brilliant.
You are, and so type A, but such a well-adjusted type A.
I was not well-adjusted for a long time. That's why I say who I am now, I would say is different even from a year ago. I am working on becoming well-adjusted.
Oh gosh.
Dana, Amanda calls me a B+.
Oh, I'm a B+. I'm like, I can shut the A off. Like, I can clock out and I'm done. Like, I can shut it off. Like, I'm like, no, I don't need to care that much.
Oh,
No,
wow,
but
that's
Dana,
great.
I started hygiene school with a 6-month-old baby. So when I'm listening to you share how much valuable insight your course
Mhm.
offers, I really was just sitting here like, wow, I wish I had that.
Well,
I
thank
really
you.
do. There were so many things that I really, if I had just known them before we got in there, I could have handled it with less stress.
Yes.
And I mean, clearly I still handled it, but if I could have had less stress, that would have just changed
Yeah.
the experience. It would have changed the entire experience. And so I feel like that's what you're providing for the students is a better experience through their program.
That is my end goal. I mean, I'm not here to teach everything. I can't. They're going to go through 2 years of this material. And I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is pass off to the professors someone who is engaged, who understands what this program is about, and who knows what it's going to take to be successful before they step in those doors. Because if this saves not only a student from failing out and having that emotional distress, if it saves the faculty, from being like, oh, again, like, how do we solve this problem? I think the way my mind works is I take it back to the basics, everything step by step by step. I extract it back to the beginning. That's how, when I teach, I do the same thing too. I'm like, where is the step one? And the step one is when they decide they want to go to dental hygiene school, how do you get them ready at that point? And I just think that that's going to save a lot of people a lot of heartache and a lot of stress, the faculty and the students alike. That's my goal, at least. We'll see how it shakes out.
I love that.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see how this beta course goes and just to see how this is going to be so successful. I
Yeah.
just
There's
see
no way it
success
can't
all
be.
over this project.
Thank you.
Dana,
I hope.
I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
I want to go back a couple topics back. There was a point you made. We were having great conversation. You said this, and it is a powerful thing. You were reaching a point of burnout, but
Mhm.
you were still happy. And I think so many people don't realize that burnout isn't always unhappy. Like,
Mhm.
you can be going in that constant adrenaline state, because I'm that person too. I feed off of the adrenaline, like I getting stuff done, checking lists. But you reached that burnout point and you just realized, okay, I've got to stop. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't sustainable for you. And you made a change and you're being productive in that change. You didn't just crash burn and decide, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
I need to do something else. That is so insightful. And I love how you're kind of taking those lessons that you just had and are providing such a valuable resource for those students.
Thank you. I mean, we see burnout everywhere. It's in our dental hygiene, in our careers, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I've felt it. I'm sure y'all have felt it. I'm sure you've been in a situation that you just thought, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, how I'm going to come out on the other side. I've been there before. And that's why I respect people who work with new grads so much because, people always say, what's your advice for new graduates? And there would have been a time where I would have said, make sure you have a good sequence. Make sure that, everything is kind of in its place and organized. That'll help you run faster and work better. And I feel like that has changed so much. One thing that I would always tell the students when they were getting ready to graduate is if you feel like you're working too hard, it's because you are. And I would say that in terms of your instruments probably aren't sharp, your equipment needs to be updated, something, maybe your ergonomics are off. Like if you're just like, why is everything feel so hard when I'm doing the job, cleaning the teeth, doing the probing, everything feels hard. Well, it's probably your equipment. When I reflect on how I used to tell people that, it is true, but I also think you're doing too much, or you're like something is not being taken care of within yourself. And I felt that for a long time. I felt it in clinical, and I thought that the fix would be pivoting into teaching, which it did because I was more fulfilled and passionate. But I never stopped learning how to run myself into the ground. Like that took a long, long time. And once it did, it was it was very eye-opening for me. And so I think for any students, or anybody out there who's going through that, like I said, give space for opportunity, give space to recover and breathe. That's the beauty of our jobs as hygienists, is you could do anything that you want. I mean, look at us. Like, we're all doing whatever the heck we want, and we're surviving out here and we're thriving. It's going well. And so I'm like, if you need to work 2 days a week as a hygienist and 2 days a week as a barista, because that's what makes you happy, do it. Like, there's nothing holding you back. And I think that that just makes you a happier person, a better clinician, a better educator, whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And I'm very passionate about that, if you can't tell, because I've been there, and I just don't want anyone to ever feel the way I felt during those hard times.
Oh, no, I'm with you 100%, Dana. I wanted to tell you one thing that I often talk about when I'm doing my presentations for students. I meet with them if I get the opportunity to, right? Before graduation, and I have a beautiful presentation for them. But one of the stories I always like plug into every presentation is running out of gas. And I tell them, like, I use the gas tank as a reference of like your energy level.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we often give the best versions of ourselves to the people who mean the least to us. And so I tell the students, I was giving hygiene my all. Every ounce of my being I was putting into my work, and I would come home with nothing left to give. Nothing. Yes. And I was tired for my daughter. I was tired for everybody. I was just tired. And it wasn't until I learned how to control that gas tank and to just expel energy where I needed it, and to make sure I had enough for my home life before I was going to go to bed, right? And so I just share that with them, and I don't want to see them expelling all their energy into the clinic the same way I had. I'm like, that was a terrible idea.
It is. It really is. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, but there's this scene where he's trying to learn how to surf, and Paul Rudd is his surfing instructor. And he's like, okay, pop up. So he pops up on the board, and Paul Rudd's like, you're doing too much, do less. And so I say that all the time to myself. I'm like, you're doing too much, do less, do less.
Do less.
And I actually had to learn this in education. I was not very good at it, but realizing when it wasn't my job to do something. Oh, well, if you go into sterilization and everything's a mess, and it's like, is it my job to handle all of this? Like, I handle what I can. I want to help my teammates, but I can't keep the office from burning down and take care of my patients, So there are times not to give less, but to do less, I think that that's important. So yeah, it's a different way of thinking about it. But when you feel that emotion, just give yourself permission to do a little bit less, not be less, not give less, just do less.
I love that. Dana, our two closing questions we'll ask you, but we may have already touched on this.
I know, there was a lot of advice given.
So
teacher at heart.
Let me need a repeat answer. That's fine. But Amanda and I love asking these questions because everyone's answers are always so different from each other's. So I'll ask the first one here. What topic or concept do you wish you learned in school that took you years to learn and practice?
That's a really good question. One thing that was a struggle was, I feel like just scaling in general. I thought I really had it down. I thought I just knew what I was doing when I graduated. I knew I was nervous, and I knew that I had more to learn, but I thought I was good at my job. And when you graduate, you are minimally competent. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but you are minimally competent. And I remember a situation where, and I was very blessed. Two of the hygienists that I worked with, well, three really, were incredible mentors to me. And I remember one time I had done a 1 quad of scaling and route planning on this patient, and she came back, but it was like months later. She didn't come back for a really long time. And my coworker, my mentor, saw her, and she was like, hey, look, I just wanted to show you that there's this huge piece of calculus on this tooth. And I was crushed because I was like, I'm doing a terrible job. but it takes time to learn those things and to get those skills. I kind of wish, I don't know in school necessarily, but I kind of wish that maybe I had attended some like advanced instrumentation courses or something right after I graduated, some hands-on one. I think that that would have really helped me. And I think the other thing that would have helped in school would maybe even just be a guest speaker or something on insurance. I know that there's a lot to learn and it's hard to teach insurance, but I do think that it can be helpful to understand and navigate that field because it is a part of what we do now.
It's so hard. Yeah, no, I agree with you. There is like nothing typically covered on insurance other than, oh, I'll just let the front business administrative staff deal with all of that and I will have no dealings with the finances side of things.
Yes.
No, that's rarely how it goes. Rarely how it goes. Like
I'm
you
like,
need to
here's
be
your
able to-
treatment plan and what is a deductible?
yeah, yeah. So it's nice. I know my front desk appreciates if I have a new patient back there, and I need to do SRP. I don't have to go to them and ask for that. I can look at the printout that Open Dental has for us, and I'm like, "Hey, your portion's $58. Do you want to get started?" Saves like 10 minutes.
Yes.
And the time and effort of our front staff. So
It is so true. I know, and school can't teach you everything. Like I said, we come out minimally competent, but I think that maybe even just resources to know, or at least be given when you graduate. Hey, these are some things that would be helpful to learn more about. Maybe these should be some of your early CEs to get in. Would be learning about insurance and stuff like that.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. Second question. What piece of advice do you wish you could go back and give yourself as a new grad? And after you answer that question, if you will just make sure you tell everybody where they can find all the best resources to set themselves up for success if they're starting hygiene school.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go back to my original piece of advice. Don't be afraid to do less and take care of yourself. You know, I think it was the first like 6 weeks at least, when I started working clinically out of hygiene school, I injured myself. And I wasn't listening to my body, and it was the dumbest injury of all time. So let me tell you how I injured myself. So, you know, whenever you lay your patient back on my chair, you could press it with your thumb, you could lay it back with your foot on a foot pedal, or there was a little panel on the side of the chair that you could lay them back. I kept leaning over like this and laying my patient back that way. I got so tight on my right side that I couldn't lean the other way. Like I physically couldn't go. So I go in the chiropractor and he's like, let's do a range of motion test. Okay, go this way. I could bend that way because that's the way I've been down to adjust my patient's chair. He's like, okay, other way. I was like, I'm stuck. I couldn't go the other way. So do less and listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to your mental health, trust your gut, listen to your intuition. Sometimes it's fear. That's okay. If it's dread, that is not okay. I kind of mentioned that earlier, but I had days where I was driving to work and I was in complete dread, panic attacks, crying, getting there, wiping my eyes, smiling. It's so good to be here. Bring my patient back. I was miserable. And I went on like that for 2 years. And so I really just say, you know, your mental health is your priority. There can be things that can be fixed in offices, but if your gut is telling you to run, if your gut is wanting you to leave, to get out, if it's telling you you need to leave hygiene, then it's like, do you need to leave hygiene or do you need to leave that particular office or situation scenario? So that is my advice. And I feel like I've been through the ringer. I've done it all. And I have not done it all. My bucket list is yet to be like completed, but just don't be afraid to try new things. And if you're ready to try a new thing and become a dental hygienist, you can follow me on Instagram at Dental Hygiene Basics. I have my podcast, Dental Hygiene Basics. You can find me at dentalhygienebasics.com. So we're all about the basics. I offer services to help with personal statement review, mock interviews to get ready for dental hygiene school, resume reviews, because a lot of applications ask for a resume. And I found that these were all areas that students were really struggling. I will also do scholarship application reviews. So if you are applying for a scholarship, which I highly recommend, because again, finances are something that's stressful for everyone. And it is very hard to bring in any sort of income in dental hygiene school. So I think that filling out scholarship applications should be a part-time job for any student, because why not? It's free money. So if you need help with that, I'm here for you. And then I've got the beta course coming out. It's, in its pilot phases, but I do have a wait list on my website that you can go and sign up for a future course. And then, of course, any type of tutoring. I do virtual instrumentation and subject matter tutoring. But with subject mattering, I do tend to focus on national board exams and people who have not been successful. So if anyone's listening that resonates with them, or of someone else who's struggling to pass the boards, that is what I'm here for, to help them get through that. And we've had a lot of success. So I do group tutoring also every Tuesday. It's only $10. So I try and give affordable options, because I know that students don't have income. They don't have a lot of money. So it's very important to me to give back in a way that they can afford it as well. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you for letting me just spew all over you guys. This is my normal behavior. I can't stop talking. And my husband's on shift, so I haven't talked to anyone in like a day. So I was ready to let it all out tonight.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much.
I love everything you're doing. It's so smart, Dana. So smart. And it's going to set up the next generation for success.
That's my plan. Thank you. Smart. Well, hopefully one day we can get you both on the show so you can share your RDH origin stories and talk about dental hygiene school and any advice you have as well.
I would love to.
Yes. I will do my very best to find all the positive things that happened in hygiene school to bring to the episode.
Very good. Okay, perfect. I would love that.
All right. Good night, you guys.
Hey, good night. Thank y'all.